This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
Real quick, before this video starts, I want to ask this question out to my audience. Do you want to play in a connected franchise or connected dynasty with me on College Football 26 or Madden 26? If you're interested in doing so, join the Patreon dog check tier. Comment on the post that I have pinned on the Patreon and let me know what system you are on and what your username is so I can get you signed up. Again, sign up on the Patreon, dog check tier. You'll see the post if you're dog check tier, and we can do the connected franchise and connected dynasty, which I think will be a lot of fun if we can get enough people on it. When we get a solid amount of people, we'll start the league, and then we can add more as the league continues of people who want to join. So don't think that just because you missed the deadline, you can't join. We'll add people as the league evolves because, we're not going to play every game for the season in 1 week or something like that. So if you're interested in doing like that, you want a game with me, get in a competitive league with me, let me know. But that being said, hope you guys enjoy this video. All right, so the Browns are in Philadelphia for their second joint practice session of training camp. First joint practice with the Philadelphia Eagle, the first of two. And this is important because, one, the practice against the Carolina Panthers, who were in similar places you last year, right? Both teams in the top 10 of the draft. It's a little bit different than going out and having to practice against the defending champs, who are the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this is not the first time the Browns have done joint practice with the Philadelphia Eagles. Since the Browns have started to do joint practices under Kevin Stefanski, the Eagles have been the team that we have practiced with the most, or the Browns have practiced with the most. So it's no surprise that they're back in Philly. Again, a ton of ties, right? Kevin Stefanski is from the Philadelphia area. Andrew Berry and his twin brother, worked in Philadelphia for a period of time, and I think Andrew's twin brother still works there. So tons of relationships probably cultivated over the years in Philly, in Cleveland, through Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. Makes a ton of sense that we keep going back to them. And that there's somewhat of a relationship between these two teams that we see has developed when it comes to the Browns' strategies, kind of mirroring Philadelphia in a lot of different ways. So this joint practice going to be important for a lot of players. And look, there's going to be more players at this practice. These two practices are going to be important for than I'm going to be able to list in this video. So this is not an exhaustive list. But what this is a list of guys that I saw some stuff last week that I want to see them improve this week. First guy is Mason Graham, who I thought had a pretty good preseason opener. But it's hard to really tell truly how effective Mason Graham's going to be in a game situation when one Myles Garrett, who I would love to bring up, needs to stop speeding, same as Shedeur Sanders, right? I got on Shedeur about going 160. Same thing is true of Myles Garrett, who got caught again. And it's even more egregious because Myles has gotten into car accidents before. This is not the first time, not the second time, not the third time. At some point, he has to exercise some level of personal responsibility and grow up when it comes to not speeding ridiculously on the highway. Again, it's dangerous to other people. It's dangerous to himself. It's dangerous for the team. Outside of getting home about a couple minutes faster, maybe, having a little bit of a thrill, there's really not a lot of upside there compared to the little bit that you're going to get from going that fast. It's a stupid decision all around, and I expect more from one of the best defensive players in the universe. So, again, Myles Garrett being stupid, driving too fast aside, Mason Graham, it's going to be hard to really evaluate just how effective he's going to be as a pass rusher specifically in the preseason because he's going to be in all of these vanilla looks, right? The Browns aren't really doing a ton of interesting stuff along the defensive line. They're not, 3-by-1-ing or anything on the line or having like kind of new alignments. They're going to save all that stuff for the regular season where they tend to get a lot more creative and they tend to kind of set guys up for better looks. All we're really going to see now is just kind of a basic one-on-one kind of look when you have help on the inside with the guard. So, for the most part, Mason Graham in these preseason games is going to be double teamed because what's going to happen is there going to be 5 offensive linemen, right? 4 defensive linemen. The Browns aren't really throwing a ton in there to kind of shake up the blitz packages because it's the preseason, which means that there's going to be a free man for the offensive line. That free man's going to usually tag towards Myles Garrett, not Myles Garrett, but Mason Graham when he's out there. So it's going to be tough to really get kind of one-on-one reps here with Mason, especially in the pass game. Run game might be a little bit different. But for Mason as a pass rusher, I think this week's important because I do think during the joint practice itself, you're going to see more and more kind of regular season-like looks from a pass rushing perspective the Browns are going to try on the Philadelphia Eagles. So they're going to do stuff with Mason next to Myles and overloads and all of that during the joint practice. And you want to see some success there with Mason Graham in those looks because that's going to really determine just how high of a ceiling eventually they can reach with him with his natural pass rushing ability. So, I'm not really going to be able to evaluate too much for Mason in these preseason games, understanding kind of just the nature of them, but understanding that, hey, the practices might allow for more kind of game day simulation stuff for Mason Graham. So you want to see what he can do from that standpoint, especially against a top tier offensive line like Philadelphia has. It's going to be good on good, right? And you want to see the Browns be able to trade blows with Philadelphia. Obviously, they have all pros on their offensive line, like we got some all pros on our defensive line or one all pro on our defensive line. So blows will be traded. But, not expecting one side to dominate the other, or at least I'm hoping that, the Browns are able to trade blows there. And I hope Mason Graham is a part of the Browns being able to trade some blows there. So that's Mason Graham. The second guy, and this is really a pair of guys, Tevin Jenkins had a pretty bad pass blocking performance in this last preseason game. It was quite concerning. I've been kind of perplexed because I've heard good things about Tevin Jenkins coming into Cleveland, especially as a run blocker, and maybe this is part of it with him, right? But I did not know he was as egregiously bad as a pass blocker as he looked in this preseason game. He was the main problem. Like him and Javion Cohen were pretty bad. But I'm going to be honest with you, Javion Cohen, I'm not really going to trip that he looks bad. He's an undrafted free agent for the most part. I don't expect him to look great. But Tevin Jenkins should have looked a lot better in that environment than he looked in that game, especially from a pass protection standpoint. So I really want to know what was up with that, right? Like, hey, is this guy going to make the team? Because I thought Tevin Jenkins was going to be able to help this team. But if that's what he looks like and that's what he continues to look like, he's not going to help this team. He's going to help himself to, a practice squad signing somewhere. So, yeah, Tevin, maybe this is why he was able to sign so cheap in Cleveland. Why he didn't sign in Cincinnati was that teams got the inkling that something was up with him physically because he just did not look himself that first preseason game. And I'm wondering if that was just, hey, guy had a bad game, he wasn't charged up for the preseason, or this is just who Tevin Jenkins is, because it was shockingly bad. I mean, especially for a veteran that started multiple games, has been graded as a plus level starter at times, that this was a bad performance by Tevin Jenkins. On the flip side of this, right, Zach Zinter, who has been injured, right? I believe he did come back to practice on Monday in a limited fashion. I do hope that he can be in practice in a more complete fashion for the joint practice, because I really want to see what Zach Zinter looks like, because the guard play in last week's preseason game was pretty bad. We talked about Tevin Jenkins not being good, Javion Cohen not being good. You hope that Tevin, just for whatever reason, looked bad, but it's not going to be a permanent thing. And then Zach Zinter, right? What does he look like when he's out there? This is a guy that I was going to give a lot of leeway. He needs an off season. He injured his knee the year he got drafted, so he really didn't get a full off season to pick up the weight that he needed to coming out of Michigan. A former All-American, kind of seen as a steal because you got him because of the injury late in the third, or I think in the fourth. What does he look like now? I want to see the progress. Really haven't been able to see much of him during camp. So, Zach Zinter, Tevin Jenkins, the guard play was pretty dookie in the last preseason game. Hopefully, if those two play, you can see a better game from Tevin Jenkins, and then also Zach Zinter kind of step up and be much better than Javion Cohen or Tevin Jenkins were in that game, so we can get a better evaluation of our quarterbacks during these preseason games, or the Browns can get a better evaluation of the quarterbacks. Another thing I want to see is these pass catchers, right? The Eagles secondary, I think, is one of the better ones in the NFL. You got Quinyon on one side, right? You got good corners all over the place, good safeties. Jerry Jeudy's looked great against our secondary, but I've been pretty vocal that I don't think our secondary is that good. I want to see more from Cedric Tillman, but that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother video. And then Deontay Johnson, who I thought had a pretty rough preseason game as well. Again, with Deontay and Tevin, it's tough for me because, again, they got bodies of work in NFL regular season games that I respect, that are very, very respectable, plus level at times. But then they get to this preseason game and they look like dog shit. And it's like, well, what's going on? Like, did you just not care? And I can understand a vet not caring, but they are at places in their career where they could just not care. So really need to see better efforts from both of those guys. Deontay wasn't great. His routes were pretty garbage. I mean, you watch the JT O'Sullivan breakdown. He's really good at pointing this out. But like both the times, he didn't even know it was Deontay Johnson. He was highlighting a former All-Pro. But he's like, yeah, these routes aren't good. Like coming from 18, these routes aren't good. And he roasts Tevin Jenkins throughout that whole film breakdown. There are times I thought JT was being a little bit too technical in that breakdown, but that's just a disagreement there. But Deontay's got to show up in this preseason game, right? You're going up against guys that you're well better than. Just play it like a real game. Show us the talent that you have. There's no reason to dog it, right? And if you dog it, that's not really going to erase the perception of you or the thought that you might still be a locker room issue, because that wasn't that long ago that he was a locker room issue. I talked about it with Deontay before. I hope that he's figured it out. I hope that he understands the gravity of this moment and that he's not going to have a lot of opportunities after this. But I know from being in situations and not fully grasping them in my life, I know from watching other people in life, that sometimes it can be obvious to everybody else around you, you don't have a ton of opportunities here. You don't have a ton of leeway here, and people just don't grasp it. And it takes them a long time to grasp it, much longer than a few months, right? Or a half a year. Some people can understand what time it is, what time the moment is, and really live up to it. Some people just can't get out that cycle. And unfortunately, more often than not, the cycle whips people's ass, and that's why getting better is a really hard thing to do as a human, why I always applaud people who do better, right? Because it's really difficult to do. And Deontay, that preseason game, the effort in it, it wasn't encouraging in that direction. Now, again, they know better, right? How he's responding in the building, how they feel about him behind the scenes. All of that shit is more important than what I think is happening from a preseason game. So don't take my word as like, oh, I know everything, right? But Yeah, if that preseason game is any indication of how this thing is going behind the scenes, then I would be a bit concerned. I would be a bit concerned. But yeah, Deontay, I need some better effort this week from Deontay overall. And you want to see your pass catchers look good. David Njoku, you want to see him trade blows with the Philadelphia Eagles. Jerry Jeudy, you want to see him trade blows with their best secondary members, Quarterbacks wise, look, this is a big week for Dillon Gabriel. There's no denying that. He's back playing 11 on 11s. He probably will do 11 on 11s in Philadelphia. Hopefully he doesn't re-aggravate his hamstring injury so he can play a little bit in this preseason game. And look, his status on the roster isn't in danger. I know there's some people who think that we're going to cut Dillon Gabriel. The Browns aren't going to cut Dillon Gabriel. His roster spot's fine and safe. Unless they find like a great trade for Dillon because Miami gets desperate or, the Saints get desperate. I think Dillon's probably going to be on this 53 and he's going to make the team. What's big this week for Dillon is like, hey, right now, at least from the outside looking in, it feels like Shador's arrow is going up and your arrow is staying pretty stagnant. You need to do something to prove that, hey, you deserve as much as attention, as much excitement behind the scenes to see you play as Shador Sanders. And this is your week to prove it, right? Whoever looks better this week is going to really show a lot. With Dillon, I think the strengths that he has to lean on is he's the process guy, right? Shador's more the playmaker, Dillon's more the process. And I think this is a fascinating thing that we're going to see play out. Hopefully, right, if both these guys execute well, is, the difference of philosophy and how that manifests itself in how do you evaluate a quarterback, right? And what I mean is, like, there are some quarterbacks who are process guys and people who evaluate the quarterback position who are very strict on process. Like, if you've ever watched a J.T. O'Sullivan film breakdown from the QB Film School, he's Mr. Process. He loves the process. He's not a big fan of relying on playmaking, right? He is all about the process, and that's one way of looking at the quarterback position. But if you listen to how other people break it down, like a Dan Orlovsky, he's big on playmaking. Like, he's like, hey, look, you could do this, you could do that. That's all fine. You can go by the book. But what makes the great ones is that they can see these plays and make these plays on a consistent basis. Shador is more of a playmaker. Dillon is a process guy, right? And I think you have the same dynamic going on with Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco, right? Joe Flacco's more of a playmaker. Kenny Pickett's a process guy. Even with like a DTR and a Deshaun Watson, this kind of broke down, but it was the saddest version of this that you could see break down. So let's just say like DTR was like more of a process guy, and then Deshaun was a playmaker, but then Deshaun tried to be more of a process guy, got worse, and then Jameis stepped in, was more of a playmaker. It's interesting to me because as much as I think Kevin has a respect for process guys because he's probably more of a process guy himself, I think he understands that the playmakers are making more plays in this offense. I mean, that sounds obvious, but the playmakers are able to execute the offense at a higher level because of their willingness to take risk. And that's kind of the breakdown here, right? I said this well before camp. My theory was that Dillon and Kenny would not look as good by the end of camp as Shador and Joe Flacco, because while we tell ourselves that the process guys are going to win in the Kevin Stefanski system, reality tells us that it's always the playmakers who make more happen in this system and make more with their opportunity than not, right? You can plan stuff to oblivion. You can have stuff right there, but everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. It's the old Mike Tyson quote, right? You can have everything planned up, but sometimes it's just really good to have somebody who could think on their feet. And I think Shedeur and Joe Flacco do that better. But it's going to be interesting to see, what does Dylan bring to the table? Can Dylan make some plays? A little bit out of structure, not completely out of structure, right? But a little bit out of structure, and can he kind of do both, right? Be a process guy, be a playmaker, because right now Shedeur playmaking at a pretty good level here in the preseason and in training camp. The process has been up and down with him, but I've been happy with where he's at so far in training camp from my eyes. Again, I'm not the Kevin Stefanski or anything like that, but, I think he's at a good place. So where's Dylan at on this marker, on this spectrum? I think that's going to be important to see. We know Joe Flacco's going to have some good moments in camp versus the Eagles. He's going to have some bad moments in camp. He's Joe Flacco. We know what that is at this point. But that's kind of my thoughts, my breakdown of what I'm looking forward to seeing in this joint practice. You guys let me know in the comment section what y'all are looking forward to see. Have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.